Today I'm going to be talking about Act 3 of A Doll's House, and this video is part of a series of 3 videos which all follow the same format in terms of looking at the plot of the act chronologically and then finishing the video with some significant points to do with characters, theme and language. The links to the other acts, videos of this type, are in the description box below. And of course, you can always look at my Doll's House playlist to see videos that I have made over the last couple of years for this play. This is a requested play. A lot of people ask me for more videos about A Doll's House, so hopefully this is what you were looking for. So in order to talk about then the chronology of Act 3, the speed and the pace of this act um, descends quite quickly into the kind of the climax of the whole play, which is of course Nora's ultimate decision to leave the family home. We'll talk more about that though in a second. The act begins with Mrs. Linde and Krogstad discussing their past relationship. And it turns out that Mrs. Lind and Krogstad had a relationship years ago, and Mrs. Lind broke it off with Krogstad because she needed to find a richer man to support her family. And Krogstad could not offer that financial security at the time. And of course, that reminds us that this play is very much to do with money. Who wants more of it? Who had it? Who is spending? Who is saving? Of course, the whole business with money and loans, which brings into question things like gender issues. So it turns out that these two characters, the two supporting characters or the two minor characters, actually begin the play on stage. And we understand that there is this past to them both. Um, Basically, both characters feel that the other could bring life, could bring purpose to their life. So they both give each other something to live for. And I think the metaphor that is used is the fact that they feel like their lives are like a shipwreck, meaning that they feel stranded without any kind of sense of destination. So they each give each other that sense of direction. And in this conversation, of course, when Krogstad is ready to and willing to get the letter back in which he has explained Nora's deceit with this forgery of this loan, Mrs. Lind, perhaps surprisingly, says, "No, no, Krogstad, leave that letter in the letterbox because the Halmers now need openness in their marriage. You must not take it back." Even though initially perhaps she went round to see him or started talking to him in order to manipulate him sufficiently to get this letter back. And when that happens, she says, no, no, they need openness. And of course, you could argue as an audience member that that's important that she says that because it means that Nora then has the impetus to break away from this house and its oppression and actually find her independence. The danger would have been if Krogstad had taken this letter back and Halma knew nothing about the loan. Nora would have again have been trapped in the marriage like she has been for the last 8 years. So you could argue that Mrs. Lind actually does Nora a favour here by refusing to let Krogstad get the letter back from that locked box. In order to, I suppose, build the tension even more, Nora and Halma enter the stage slightly kind of halfway through this act as they come back from the Sternborg's fancy dress ball, the Tarantella dance ball. And Halma is a bit drunk. He's had a lot of champagne. And Nora, you can tell by the tone and the shortness of her language, and the fact that she's also not drunk, is not really willing to continue the festivities now that she is home, because that home brings her back to reality with a bit of a bump. While she was at that party, she could escape into the world of the illusion of the dance and the Tarantella dress. But now that she's back home, um, of course, it's a reality check, and this is, of course, where the initial discussion will begin about Nora and Halma's marriage, and in her view, how much of a facade it actually has been for almost a decade now. In order to prolong the agony, I suppose, into that final climax of Halma reading the letter, Dr. Rank enters and they have a conversation, and it materializes that Dr. Rank is effectively going away to die, and he leaves a calling card in letterbox with a black cross in it, I believe, and that's to show that he is near to death, and therefore, of course, with him no longer alive, it means that Nora doesn't even have that character as a support network once she leaves the house. She's very much on her own. Halmer also, in keeping with his kind of, I suppose, toxic masculinity, um, admits in a fantasy that he likes to pretend that Nora is almost somebody to rescue, and he comes in and saves the day. And because he's perhaps kind of aroused by that, and because he's also drunk, he tries to initiate sex with Nora, but she's not in the mood. And it basically doesn't kind of prolong that festive spirit from the party. Um, then we obviously are at the almost at the climax of the play. Halmer goes to read the post, and Nora quickly tries to leave the house. And she doesn't leave because just as she's about to leave, Halmer bursts in, angry and furious, because he has read the letter and he now knows what Nora has done regarding the loan. Not once, though, does he think about why she did it. Not once is it a question of his life and health. He immediately assumes that she's done this to damage his reputation, and it becomes a diatribe or a rant all about his own respectability, and how he would look in front of other people, mainly men, such as Krogstad. So he contemplates not only what damage another person has done to him, but more importantly, he contemplates the damage a woman has done, and that's even more galling to him. Um, a second letter arrives after this angry outburst, in which Krogstad forgives the loan, and then Halmer, quite pathetically, really, tries to make amends and basically say, don't listen to anything I say, Nora. I was angry. Everything is now fine. But by that point, the marriage has gone past the point at which it can be saved. She has seen and she has heard enough. And Halmer's true character has now been brought into the spotlight, and there's no amount of grovelling that he can do in order to make her forget how he reacted. And it's because it became all about him and his own reputation that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And of course, Nora's language here becomes very serious. She has completely done away with the childlike language that she had at the beginning of the play. She speaks with great candor and great honesty. She talks about how their marriage has been a facade, and how she has been a doll, and that it is systemic from her father, and it's going into her children as well from her. And she's had enough of it. And it, of course, culminates in this exit, where she leaves the house. And by leaving, of course, she isn't only rejecting the marriage between her and Halmer, but Ibsen is also using Nora as a device and a mouthpiece to reject the wider societal oppression that marriage can often give women at the time, particularly married mothers. So it has both micro and macro, or small world and large world repercussions in terms of her exit. And the last thing that an audience hears, really, is a door slamming shut. And a critic, when this play was first performed, said that the sound of that door reverberated around the world because it was so serious. And of course, it was so serious, in fact, that Ibsen was forced to write an ending where Nora, in fact, stayed when she was shown her sleeping children. But rarely now is that ending ever thought about, because yes, this original ending might be more controversial and shocking, but that doesn't mean we have to erase it from consciousness. Sometimes shocking things create good discussions and good debates. We can't just get rid of it. Sometimes it helps us to face up to these issues. So that is the chronology of Act 3. So just like with other videos, I'm going to finish by adding in these coloured boxes around the outside, just to help kind of further any analysis really to do with characters, language, context. I'm not going to go through all of these because, of course, I think most of these are fairly self-explanatory. But at the end, of course, remember that Nora does take the dress off, and she puts on her regular outdoor coat. And I think that's interesting because that's her transforming from or transitioning from this role as a doll wife to an empowered individual with her own identity. So that changing of the clothes is significant. She's effectively physically removing that tarantella dress and becoming a real person. Um, when you have characters in a drama taking turns in a conversation, it's called adjacency pairs. So particularly with the end of Act 3, which is essentially Halma and Nora on stage by themselves for half an hour, I always try and get my students to use the term adjacency pairs as a way of analysing this turn-taking of their conversation. Um, a lot of things that Halma uses in order to try and get Nora to stay in the home are things like education, law, religion, and public opinion, but none of it works. And what Nora essentially says is that an individual has the right to challenge all of those institutions and to challenge the moral codes of those institutions as well. So, despite Halma throwing everything at trying to keep Nora in the house, she rejects it all, dissenting from all of this, and effectively is now certain to leave the house. And of course, she leaves that house in a democratic fashion. She chooses to leave the house. Halma also allows her to leave the house, and she is emancipating herself from the dystopian setting of the house. So when you're using words like democratically, emancipating, or dystopian, it means that you are very clearly linking to texts within the political and social protest genre, of which you might be studying this text for. As we've said, Halma completely overlooks why the loan was taken out. It isn't about how she sacrificed her innocence for him, as I imagine society says to any wife they should do, but it all becomes about his reputation and how he kind of how Halma would gain power from forgiving Nora, appealing to his male ego. In effect, she doesn't want to be forgiven. She wants to take responsibility for what she's done as a human being in the same way that a man would. And that links us to Act 1 when she talks about how earning money in secret in the attic was almost like being a man, meaning it was quite appealing, actually, because she was able to take control of her finances. Finally, as we've said earlier, Nora's language, by this point, the tone, the register, becomes logical and decisive. And in fact, it becomes quite accurate as well. Perhaps Nora knows more about society than Halma gives her credit for. And of course, every time she makes a valid point about how thousands of women have over the years sacrificed their lives for marriage and children, Halma replies by saying things like, "You're feverish, you're not well," completely dismissing the logic of her responses. Of course, Ibsen said himself that a woman cannot be herself in modern society. So, just to repeat that phrase that I used earlier, clearly Halma is using Nora as a device to show the amount of sacrifice that women often have to put up with, particularly married mothers. And it's that house that represents that entrapping force of marriage as an institution. Okay, so hopefully that was useful. Again, there are two other videos like this for Act 1 and Act 2. I'll put the links to those below in the description box. But also have a look at other videos that I've made for A Doll's House, including kind of key revision points and analysis of certain sections, analysis of language. Have a look and you might find something that's useful to you. Okay, so thank you very much for watching and good luck in your studies. Thank you.